Mấy ông non con của trời sẽ chẳng bè và trong gió. Đến trường như trên đó nhìn đôi nóng đôi đôi sợ. Đi nhẹ đường quên chỉ dễ dễ nhìn kia đông có về. Con đó dành bên ra ra mặt bên đôi đó hỏi kẹt sợ. Rồi so càng lo bờ trên đó sẽ nghe lời trôi trôi dòng. Rồi đó chờ đôi niềm môi như lón để trên trọn trốn trọn. Mà ra bên sân đó hỏi những cười trên nhiên chân xa rạc trên. Then đạo chơi dân chơi ra sẽ yon để lên soi gia sự. Bên đó chờ đợi chơi nhẹ yon để đo lên mình sẽ chuẩn bị yon lo đi. Trong đó mà rap. Okay. Om Ram Ban Van Sante. And then the general said, General, and then shall in the body around them and on is on the door and the body Johnson. Gồm bởi trong nhân trên nhiệt đen kinh mê bởi dạo không ai đồ. When soil goes and got a shit, sempre more than in by niche. So, nam yan, then, just so I'm going to nam wine. Would yes, on the even don't yes, and don't circle. Some yeah, in the and grand John Gerard, but rock. So wine and jump by and jam up, and man, trying to sell on the dos. Bam jen de ben man dong na len zhang yan jen se so gan be ra ba chuan zhe chen lam ye xin ke lam so che re men den ze yan den ya sa de man jen da ye zhang Om men zhe jie yan jian bo Long Jen Gwen Yang Mo Wang Sen Chen Gwen Wen Sen Den Zer Sa Wen Lam Be Sha Sim Ge Dong Ba La Ge Dong Ba Dan De Ge Dong Da La Mi Ge Nam Dan Do Wen De Dan Bang Jen Ge Dong Da Jin Che Den Do Nam Man Nam Da Dan Yang Be Sin Je Tam Chi Nam Je San Je Sa Lam Bo Cha Te Ji Du Ba Ge Da Re Tam Be Che Sam Yes, I'm back. We're on the winter. Got on the show on the G. Song by Shing Yam Sam or a check there. Semper's house.
So please listen with the proper motivation and the proper conduct as is taught in the words of the Buddha and the treatises that we will listen to this teaching and put it into practice for the purpose of establishing all our mother sentient beings that are equal in extent to space on the level of omniscient Buddhahood.
Go culture at the Punore, Niba culture at it, name of the church, some of your water and ended it. Some culture botany, Jumla Mom check it, some like a company of Sonia Segura.
So first of all, what is important is our motivation. And then second thing that is important is that we listen to the Dharma really well and consider it, and think about it very carefully. And then the third thing that's important is to do the dedication and aspirations. So these are the three excellences, in fact.
The Tamokulon, the Tate, Tanipamoshi, and in around that. Che, ya win ye the rock. The Tarin Kapsuba chain, the Karsana, ne Lame to do Jibin Sir Mondo Tere, Mondo Tela Jiden, Nambanga Samyore, Nitambo, Mondo Sikil, and Yibate, Mondo Kachin Yimba, Sumbangondo Yamin, getting this in Yoba, Shibamondo Sosa to Jangin Sur, Maba, Tene, Mondo Bio Aje, Mayobares.
So now we're moving from the first excellence, from the motivation, into the teaching itself, where we are listening to the Dharma. And here we have 5 main topics on this teaching, which is on the preliminary practices to the Guru's hard practice, dispeller of all obstacles. And the 5 topics are the meaning of the phrase preliminary practices, how the preliminary practices are important, the extensive, medium length, and concise preliminary practices, how the preliminary practices clear away obscurations and gather the accumulations, and the types of preliminary practices.
네, 단단하라고 ngaba ngondo yewe naware, ngondo yewa telayantene, jowa ngondo, tunji ngondo, ngoshi ngondo, sumyebe naane, tandangaranzo, ngoshi ngondo naware, nidi shisende. Ane ngoshi ngondo nawalayang, tine timongchi ngondo, tine nanji ngondo sanyiyobare, tandanganzo, timongchi ngondo kapsendebare. Timongchi ngondo layang, tine lodo nabashi yisene, tajulnikawa, tsemindawa, lejunde, Korean wheat she yoba nawale, tandangaranzo, ane Korean yimi nawale yobes.
So now we have reached the 5th topic, which is the types of preliminary practices, of which there are 3. The preliminaries of material items, the preliminaries to the meditation session, and the preliminaries to the main part. And we finished going over the first 2 of those, and now we're on the 3rd, the preliminaries to the main part. And in this, there are 2 parts, the outer common preliminaries and the inner uncommon preliminaries. And we are within the outer common preliminaries, which consists of the 4 thoughts that turn the mind from samsara, the difficulty of obtaining the freedoms and advantages, death and impermanence, karma, cause and effect, and the sufferings of samsara, or the faults of samsara. And now we have reached the 4th of those, the faults of samsara.
ene Korean yemi kapsulayan, tene Korean the Jirisamba, Chadao to Russo to Masamba, Yebare, Yebe Nane, Korean to Majisamba to Shisinde, and the Kapsababa, and the Russo to Masamba to Nala Deviores.
So within the topic of the faults of samsara, there are again 2 main sections: the contemplating the sufferings of samsara in general, and contemplating the individual sufferings of the 6 realms. And now we've reached the 2nd of those 2, which is contemplating the individual sufferings of the 6 realms.
That's also said group to Masamba Tendaya, Nalwa, Gita, Ndo, He, Amin, Ta, Chiani, Tuari to Grace, and Dory to Name, Azampe, Nalwa Gita, Dressing Bode, and Shiva Race.
So they contemplating the sufferings of the individual 6 realms. We have the 6 realms within there, which are the hell realm, the preta realm, animal realm, the human realm, demigod realm, and the god realm. And we have now finished the first 3, the hell realm, preta realm, and the animal realm.
Ene Kazan going to Takari Shivaris in Ananzo. And then it's also about the pickups, Yamlenche pickups, Chedan on the Chapores, and Chegum Jogumi, connecting Yamlenche Chapores, Sashiba in Bass.
So when we are contemplating the sufferings of the 3 lower realms, I talked a little bit about how to do this before in the recent sessions. And so basically, when we do this contemplation of the suffering of the three lower realms, we have to use both analytical meditation and resting meditation.
네, 방아람서 지금 지한데 지금 되나 네 가상내기 네 삼발의 팅이장 네 공작고 열에라 넘버 공배 통내장 공작고 열에 아니 대답을 성이 공작 차려 제라 네 녀성 대답도 기백이 센전 텐솔라 아니 간주 인지 제보레스 가상하기 공도 디슈바레스
So when we are doing analytical meditation on the sufferings of samsara and the sufferings of the three lower realms, we have to both do it in the manner that we are really thinking deeply about it with the mind, just thinking about it deeply. And in addition to that, we also have to do it in the manner in which we have some kind of different kind of content, like a visualization or that style of meditation as well, where we have some image or other content besides just thought. And then we have to think about the sufferings of the beings in this realm in that way and really feel it and then give rise to compassion for those beings.
근데 닝제서량도 근데 닝제서와데 생동화와식 영대바식 다 텔레 다르되기 로식 여바테나 근데 닝제서요레스.
So what is meant by compassion is when there is a being that is going through some suffering, experiencing some suffering, and we have the intention, we give rise to the intention to free them of that suffering. That is what is called compassion.
그래서기 뭐된절랑 안저기 간닝제 공부를 해봐라. 간닝제 가르치는 간닝제 공부를 해서는 더 걸리기로 합니다.
So we're talking about the fact we have to give rise to compassion to sentient beings and so on. But we may come up with the question or the doubt, well, why is that? Why do I have to give rise to compassion for sentient beings?
다 단단하랑 저 테니 동알데 되기요 말에 테니 동알레 졸월 되기래. 테니바 상상화랑 대답을 되기요나 테니 셴바 소양 대답을 되기로와. 언조양 예성의 제베 좋았음진 내소양 테니 동알 되기 말에 동알 졸월 되기래. 대당대 직발에도 공안증이.
So we should consider that for ourselves, we know very well that we don't want to experience suffering. And we know very well that we want to be free from our suffering. We want to be free from suffering. And in exactly the same way, others are the same as us. In fact, others don't want suffering and they want to be free from that suffering.
나랑 저 조아미나 따요 마야 마랑 클라스하기래. 된 셴바나 클라스하여 말을 남는 되게 말아. 마랑 클라스하여 니스가 사부기요나 셴바양 카요레 클라스하부로 직바로 직송으로.
So if we take an example about us humans, we all know we have to eat food, right? When we can't really say, I have to eat food, but others don't need to eat food. Everybody is actually the same. We all have to eat food, just like we ourselves have to eat. Other people as well have to eat.
클라스에 가르치는 것으로 카요로. 콜라 카요레 나랑 카요. 카요가 직바로. 카요는 클라스하고로.
And eating food is basically dependent on having a mouth, right? I have a mouth and others also have a mouth. Other people also have a mouth. So as soon as we have a mouth, we have to eat. We're the same that way.
카요나 클라스하기 사부기 여바 나신기. 동안이요나 동안에 졸그드바 직바로.
And just as if we, just by virtue of having a mouth, we have to eat food. In the same exact way, just by virtue of having suffering, just by the fact of having suffering, we need to be free from suffering in the same way. We're all the same.
And then indeed, some the give is to us and $10 and on to
and this being the case, if we think about it in that way, then these sentient beings who are suffering, they definitely deserve compassion, and it's very reasonable, and it is totally the right thing for us to give rise to compassion for them.
Meaning, some to give it to us something to tell Tamji, Rangi, Korwa Tomayumar, and Aran Korwa Rilamata Tomayumar. Toma maybe Tunita Pama Machiba Chicken Yomares and that's review Manzota. Changesenberg taking Lugla.
So that's one reasoning for why we should give rise to compassion for human beings. And a second reason is that all of the beings in the three lower realms, there's not one of them that hasn't been our mother, because samsara has no beginning. Samsara has been going on forever. So that being the case, all of the beings in the lower realms have all been our mother at one time or another, and this is the outlook of the Mahayana.
And then indeed, any and then around to give how much for Tene, Dongan Yongi Yona, turning around to give Sambala Carido, how much to Dongan Trona Sangitua. Oh, Tena Shingi, Tene, Niason to J Begi, Toa Semjin Tedovan, Tene, Dongan Letana, some Yinji Kibu Yuri. Carichigo begins and Kare, or Toa Semjin Tezo, Rangi Pamarawa. So say Pamana Gay Chopa Chidang, Gyo Yamaki Pamana Gay Mochopas Yomarwa. Pama Imba Chikwarwa. Chesa, Yeme Pamalayang, Tene, Nings Jibo Yuri, and they give Pama de Land, Nings Jibo, Nings get out the Tsumardo.
And for us, when our parents are suffering, we always have the motivation. We can't help but have the motivation to help relieve the suffering, to want to relieve their suffering. And the ascending beings in samsara and the three lower realms, all of those sentient beings have also been our mothers. It's just the difference that they aren't our mothers in this life. But in fact, there's no difference as regards to the fact that they are our parents. In fact, you can't really say because they're not my parents right now, they were never my parents, or they're not my parents. It's exactly the same. So just like we have the compassion and want to relieve our own parents now of suffering, and these beings in the three lower realms are also our parents, and we should have the same feeling towards them.
And some get permanent to turning around to get Nane, Donyamang, the mission, but the only year Shaiban, Yuna, Tene, along around the multi part logo Euro. Then I think Tene, changing permanent Zola, Tene, Chikibu, then logo Euro.
So it's just like if we have borrowed some money from somebody last year, for example. If we borrow the money from somebody, we have to pay it back now. So it's in the same way, these beings have been our parents in the past, and so now we have to have the same, motivation to pay them back and help them.
In so the Pamala Tene to us and Shimba, Nison to one as over to us and Tada, Shimbala, Ninji Chigimitua. Tandaki Pamanted the Ninji Chigitua. To Malchuna, cutting Ninji Chigu, Jimson Carres and Pamasoki cutting the Hagu. Corona, Amagi cutting John Yedi, the Corong Ninji Chigua. Or Ninji with Jimson the Carsana, Pamagi, Korape Yagucheshire, Tati cutting the Tian, the Pama Dungal Chonte, that are near Pamatas Dungaletona Sangira. But the cutting collar, Sarah Korwa Tuma Memon Amachishaban, as only a cutting Euro, cutting about a Chibaro.
So as we are now, we generally don't really regard other beings the same way we regard our own parents in this life. We don't think of them as people we should help and have compassion for and so on. And the reason is that we can experience and see very easily the kindness and help that our parents have given us in this life, that they've brought us up and so on and helped us in this life. But all the sentient beings of samsara who have been our parents in the previous life, they're exactly the same in the kindness and help they have shown us when they were our parents before. There's no difference at all. So we should also have compassion for them. And so our compassion arises on the basis of remembering this kindness and remembering the benefit that others have done for us. So our parents have helped us in this life so much. So we have compassion on the basis of that, because we see that. In the same way, all the sentient beings who have been our parents in previous lives, they also benefited us so much. So we should also have compassion for them in the same way. So this is the reason why we should have compassion for sentient beings. Otherwise, sometimes we can have doubt or not really get it. Like, why should I have compassion for sentient beings? So I've explained now that we need compassion. We need to cultivate and give rise to compassion. But now we may wonder, how do we do that? What is the method for giving rise to compassion? So first, there's three aspects that we have to think about. First of all, to understand and realize that the sentient beings have been our parents. And secondly, we have to remember their kindness. Keep in mind how kind and how much benefit they showed to us. And then thirdly, we have to then be motivated to repay that kindness. So this is actually the method for giving rise to compassion, for cultivating compassion. First of all of the sentient beings have been our mothers, and we have to know that. We have to understand that. And that's one. Then once we've known that and understood that well, then we have to remember and understand how much kindness they've shown us and how much benefit they've done for us. And then after that, once we realize and really understand how much kindness they've shown us, we have to understand that we need to repay that kindness. So this is called the three aspects. So this is not the three aspects actually, but it's the three kind of thoughts. Yeah, the three thoughts concerning this practice of generating compassion, which give the motivation.
네 니바텔라 ini eta botwa senjen tamche ini miesong de ke ba tegi tongal nam tongal gi yu denzo ini hanachi marong sambe gi demba shbu ko ini teji kala miesong gi ro senjen denzo la tongal gi yu dang chana ya gala sambe gi memba obi ini nyesong ki dwa semje teta dunga ki gyudang dunga ki gyu ani dhalwa shik ngi cha sambekin dhalwa sumgo gore tila dhalwa sumsikir dimba dang dhalwa memba dang dhalwa thamcha dang dhalwas.
So then, as the second step, we have to cultivate the intention to free all these beings in the lower realms from suffering. We have to think all of those beings in the lower realms are suffering so intensely, and I wish they could be free from this suffering. I want to free from the suffering. That's the first part, the first factor here, which is the intention. And then after that, we also have to have a real interest or desire to free the sentient beings from suffering. And we have to think to ourselves, wouldn't it be so great? Wouldn't it be the best thing if these beings were free from suffering? So that's the second factor there, which is this interest or desire. And then the third factor here is the commitment. And this consists in contemplating the sentient beings and their suffering and how we have to free them from suffering, and thinking to ourselves, making the commitment, I myself will free them from suffering. So we need all of those three as well. This is called the three kind of connected factors. First of all, we need to have the interest, the desire connected. And secondly, first the intention. The first one was the intention. To free them from suffering, we have to have that connected in this practice. And then also, secondly, to be connected with the interest or desire to do that. And then thirdly, with the commitment. We have to be connected with the commitment to do that.
That can take you to crossing that. The Russell Jikone, and then another pillar, somebody in the Jirebetone, and then until the Ninja Jigawata. The Wasum done to Russell the Sambara, send Samba. Take it on the down until the Ninja Jigra.
So when we put these into practice, first of all, the three thoughts related to the mothers, remembering that the sentient beings are our mothers and so on. And then the three connective factors, when we put those into practice, that actually will give rise to compassion in us. That is the method for giving rise to compassion in us. And these are all affecting our attitude and our thinking. So we think in this way using the three thoughts and the three connected factors, and then that attitude and thinking of compassion will arise.
아니 동아디 동아 제보당 대이 제보 동아녀의 규텔에 아니 잘외 제도라 되는 거 나오지 다 건졌습니다. 서로다 그래. 당에 성게 도와 선제 담제 동아기 규당 잘외 제도라 되는 저런에 제섬 짓고네 담배 체진 낸체.
So once we have this motivation that we cultivate in this way, then how do we put it into practice? What is the practice to do using this motivation? Well, first of all, we take into consideration all the suffering of sentient beings, and together with the cause of the suffering, both the cause of their suffering and the result, which is the suffering itself. We should then pray to the three jewels that all those sentient beings are free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And then we have to do our practice, including the preparation, the main part, and the conclusion.
And then the 다시 공부가 인지 계획이 점진 이네 인지 컨디션 계고래 계산은 냠낸 컨디 제고래 센터 대숨 전제 주바레스.
So now I have explained, first of all, the reasons why we should have compassion for sentient beings. And secondly, how to cultivate that motivation of compassion. And thirdly and finally, how we should put that into practice, how we should practice with the motivation.
안동양 전에 말하는 소이나양 이네 체리당 이네 체럽 토메네 아니 녀몽바 독숨디 보내 되네 백바삼기 디바 당레 대바식 다 싸요래 텐더인디 되네 계와치마 되네 예성 대다도 되네 계녀와다 계시바 식장 잡대요래.
So as for ourselves, in samsara, which we have been in without beginning for, we've been in samsara forever, we have accumulated really inconceivable, innumerable negative actions while we've been living in samsara. And in the past, we've accumulated those negative actions. And in the future as well, due to accumulating those negative actions, it is really very possible, and in fact, not too far away, the possibility that we would be born into the lower realms.
And then I mean, what also你送到建议哇，你解释吧，现在你当时啦，他那做等等你的有嘞，天的现场是不是的嘞？
So, given this situation, that we are not too far away from being born in the lower realms, that it's actually not a distant possibility. It is actually quite possible that we'd be born into the lower realm. This is actually quite terrifying, isn't it? And for example, as we say in English, sometimes there's a danger zone, right? This is actually where we are now. We're in this situation which is actually quite dangerous. And why is it dangerous? It's because we are so close to being born in the lower realms. It's actually, and we actually may just be about to be born in the lower realms. However, we also have this really great opportunity in our present situation. And what is this opportunity? It's from the fact that we have attained our freedoms and advantages, precious human body, and we are practicing the Dharma, and we have met our teachers, qualified lamas, and we have been able to receive instruction from those lamas. So this is a extremely fortunate, extremely great opportunity.
Puridang Tarba, Tamji Chimpe Kubang, Sanji Kubang, Tobe Yabaki, any so to be Kogopshi, Kandana Ranzol. Then to take over some wish at all.
So the reason why this opportunity is so great and so fortunate is that we actually have the means at our disposal now that we can prevent ourselves being born in the lower realms in the future. Otherwise, it's possible it's possible we could be born in the lower realms. We're very close to that, but on the other hand, we have this means right now to avoid that in our future life. We can practice and be reborn in the higher realms instead. We have that ability now. So this is really a great opportunity, isn't it?
Tendi Kogop Samboding around the Pujit Tido, Latang Moto, Kogop Samboding around the Tuzi Yirum Buchi de Marda. Tuzi Yoto de la Tani, Kiwachima, Tanazing, son like Yeg, Toma Meben Sashara, or the Denzo Meba Sir to be a song like Kimuka Sir to be a Kogop the Yodi Tang around the Sobo Yores.
So given that we have this opportunity now, we have to take advantage of it at once, right away. We should not delay and wait and take a long time to get to it. Since we have these negative actions we've accumulated for so long in samsara, and they're all those negative actions have the power to bring us rebirth in the lower realms. We have to take advantage of the situation right now that we have the ability to use these means that we have at our disposal to get out of that situation.
I think some do around the Kogop Sango de Pejatan, yes, some do Kimuka Chebala, Childan around the numbers on Chukang, Chennai and Jingur. In a mixalki, yes, on the Tikpikoni Kigi Yudi, that's all the Taborche will be Yudi, and around the Kobu Karichiku version. Largely laying about Tenzolatini, Gabatabe, Shapachi. Chinje aning song Tedala Kiwi, led Dipati, Michin and be Tamchat Tempochiku Yore. And the Yobatang, Tei Yana. 아니 또 시고는 되니 샤빠치고 거래. 근데기 샤빠치네 아니 예선 대달라더니 김미고 바더니 소고요래.
So given this opportunity that we have these methods at our disposal to take advantage of our situation and free ourselves from the danger of the lower realms. And so in general, we could practice any kind of Dharma practice to take advantage of the situation. There's all kinds of various practices to do that. But in this context of considering our accumulated negative actions, this vast amount of negative actions that we have accumulated, the practice that we need to do is to confess those negative actions and make a commitment to not do the negative actions again, and to practice the confession using the 4 powers. So this is what we have to do to purify all of those negative actions.
Sombola, Nin Kebaina, Ni Kamadi Namchang, De Chabla, Yunring Wood. Meaning Timugla, any Chujinawa Mebadi Batang.
So if we are born into the lower realms on the basis of these negative actions, the suffering that we will experience is extremely intense And it is very prolonged suffering and very intense as for a very long time. And we also, in that situation, the Lorem would be really lost in ignorance without knowing what to do to get out of it.
아니 성도께 비센전 대다기니 이네 미제에 레마도 가야 지시면 말에 대인비 아니 녀성래 타르비투 가야요 말에 엔디 나랑조 다리 삼부여래 녀성을 찍게 차러와 있나 근데 타레페 메스칼 가고 임바데 나랑조 하고 임바 하고 고고요
So the beings in the lower realms, they really don't know to do much else besides non-virtue. They're not really doing much virtue at all, and they only really know how to do non-virtue. So that being the case, there's really very little opportunity for those beings to free themselves from that situation. And so we have to consider this in that way. We have to consider in this way and understand how difficult it is to escape from the lower realms.
이나양 녀성 선보라 제나다 다 동알 레도 동알 마도 민도 이나양 토리 선보라 제나 아니 디기 여사레 삼나 아니 토리 선보 텔라양 아니 잘와상제당 대세 장주 대세 남지 드니 토리 나양 대화 요말에 동알 요에 송요
So this is the way it is in the lower realms. It is just suffering that is established. We all understand that the lower realms are just suffering. But then we may wonder whether whether the higher realms, upper realms, are basically happy, whether they consist of happiness. And on this subject, the victorious ones, the Buddhas, as well as their children, the bodhisattvas, they have taught that there actually is no real happiness in the higher realms.
이나양 단단하라 어쩌다 녀성그 동안 컴백하러와 다 녀성그 동안 컴컴인데 오늘 다 녀성나다 대화면도 동안 해도 삼바실리기로와 대사르제다 다 프리싱인지 열에 삼그러양다 프리숨싱이 열에 나브라 프리싱이 열에 다 토리 나다문에 되게 얘기를 다 삼바신 되게 삼발레시기로와 다 견들려봐이나 토리 나양 단 대화요 말에 정말 열에 시고
Yeah, because we have now been thinking about the lower realms and contemplating the suffering of the lower realms, and we have really got that. We understand the lower realms are nothing but suffering. But then naturally, we could come upon the thought, oh, well, but there are higher realms, there's upper realms. So those must be happy, right? Those must be happy. So it's because this thought may arise, then we have to now address that and explain that the higher realms are not happy. There's no happiness.
아 도아르 주디네 나메 당보니바 숨바 시시네 시바암 이니 토리기네 당보 미 동아 삼발라
So now that we have finished explaining the first three realms of samsara, the first realm, the second realm, and the third realm, and now we have arrived at the contemplation of the fourth realm of samsara, or to put it another way, the first of the upper realms.
다 미딘졸라 예나 드니 보다 모다 마닝스네 숨겨레 아니야 리기 권에 예와이나 드니 잘릭 제릭 망릭 탐세릭 돌베릭 스데네 나나 소바이 듀레스
So this realm, the fourth of the six realms, or the first of the upper realms, is the human realm. And humans can be divided into three genders: the male, female, and other gender, or neutral gender. And they can be divided as well into the 4 or 5 castes or social classes: the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and so on.
먼저 직등이 칼라 자르고 릭슨 직도와 아니 릭슨의 뽐도 그릴라 소바 직도와 망릭스는 미망그릭 직도와 참세 릭슨이야 최징 릭지도와 그 돌베 릭슨이야 릭교부 딘도 같은 거 자 동면서도 전부 점게서도 된소다 릭교부 직이로와 이렇게 직가도 왜나.
So in our world, we do have these classes, right? We have the class of the kings, and the caste of the kings, and the lordly caste, which is basically talking about politicians and ministers and so on. And we have the caste of the common people, just everyday kinds of people. And we have the caste of Brahmins, who are those who practice the Dharma, or practice, religious specialists, you can say. And then we also have the caste of the Shudras, or the kind of lower classes, which are the really poor classes, such as those who work with metal, and tailors, and so on and so forth, are generally considered to be poor classes or lower classes. So there are these 5 castes.
네 밀라양 그니 라소다 네 동안 세세 세니셰바이나 네당 류데네 되는 거랑서 단다 통신바레스.
So for the human realm, to now go over the topics of the place of the human realm, the bodies of humans, the sufferings in the human realm, and the lifespan of humans. The first 2 of these, the place of the human realm, and the bodies of humans, these are, as we know them from our life, we all have seen those 2.
타 동알데 시바이나 숨바 동알데 시바이나 동알라 이네 추르디나 자위 동알 숨스니어레 타 파르 게바이나 동알 침부게 세네드니슨 셰여레스.
So if we now move on to the topic of the suffering of the human realms, there are taught the 3 root sufferings, and there's also something that is taught called the 8 great sufferings.
다데 동알 침부게 세르 갑술라 등이 대지 도조 동알 총화양 망보 슈라 덴도비여레스.
And when we teach the 8 great sufferings, it is understood by implication that there are many, many, many other kinds of lesser, smaller kinds of sufferings.
저의 동알 숨보티 가레스나 이니 동알이 동알 결외 동알 캬바드지기 동알을 쓰는 송여레스.
So as for the 3 root sufferings, these are the suffering of suffering, the suffering of change, and the suffering of the pervasive suffering of conditioned phenomena.
동알이 동알 세나 간다지라 시구여레스나 네 동알 균메체바 직 총대에 지기젤라 직 총대에 지여레 원델라틴이 동알기 동알을 쓰기여레.
So what is it actually that we are talking about when we talk about the suffering of suffering? Well, this refers to when it can happen that there is a kind of continuous suffering. There's a suffering that comes upon somebody, and then it's followed by another suffering and another one. this is said to be the suffering of suffering.
Ena pashive tungal masang ngala. Tene mashive tungal chunga tabo. Yang mashive tungal masang ngala. Tene poshive tungal chunga tabo. Poshive tungal masang ngala. Tene kamba tsekpal sive tungal chunga ina. Tate ane tungal ji tungal.
For example, if our father dies and then not long after that, without that suffering of the father dying being relieved, then our mother immediately dies. Or if our mother dies and then while we're still suffering from our mother's death, then our child could also die. Or for example, if our child dies and before we have been relieved of that suffering of our child dying, then, for example, our house could burn down. This kind of suffering is referred to as the suffering of suffering.
Okay, ani sosikyo kya tini toklawa yore. Ani sheyang tugirawa ngaransula. Tungal chikichela chikiyona ngape tungal lepsing sakidwa. Ota tenzo karre esna. Tungal ki tungal nawa chudu.
So this kind of suffering is easy for ordinary people to understand, ordinary beings to understand. We all kind of understand that we're kind of suffering. And in addition, we can also talk about it. It's not difficult for us to explain to people or talk about it. We all talk about our suffering. I had this happen to me the other day, or I'm going through this kind of suffering as well. So this is what the suffering of suffering is like.
Ne church genso lamla mashupa tagas church genso gen tonsingire ne lamla shukwe papa kana sogi jang tons toxic.
So this suffering of suffering is commonly like perceivable by anyone, and everybody can understand it in common. So the ordinary people can understand it and know about it, and people who are practicing the Dharma also can understand it and know about it. And in addition, those noble beings, noble people who are on the bodhisattva bhumis and awakened beings and so on, they also know about it.
Ani kandavesana, ani tanda dewa yobate, ani kale kandesine par. Gyurne tene dungal gi namla jukju. Ela gyure dungal sekir.
So now the second type of suffering, which is the suffering of change, this refers to the happiness, or what seemed like happiness to us in our lives, when that happiness little by little, gradually then turns into suffering. This is called the suffering of change.
Ene ta gyurwe dungal tene karsagore. To some kokyorde, nungir tonge deskale kaguyore. Ene chue chingen soge dea, chue cheba soge dang, ne lamla shoba agba. Zogi ani tontu.
So this suffering, the suffering of change, is not so apparent to everyone. It's a little bit difficult to perceive. So those who are practicing the Dharma and the noble beings, they are able to perceive it.
Ani pena ani bahangi lula ene nasa meba tapo. Ani ngarang la benot longje mangbo yoban tapo. Ani ngarang la nepala sopa kaya meba. Tendegi digi yobe fur ela. Ini lo bordo. Ani ngarangi lula nasa chonga tapo. Tini ngarangi benot longje la tini parche chonga tapo. Tini ngarang la tini denji neba chonga la sopa. Chao yongdu Tene nganagi dewa de pa gyuru. Gyuru di tegi tola tene dungal le biyor. O tela ta gyuru dungal la singti ngansula tende nyogyo yor.
So when we are in a situation where we are totally healthy and happy in that way, and we have a good amount of wealth and material possessions, material enjoyments, and we're in a situation where we don't have many problems in our life, it will happen all of a sudden that we may fall ill, fall severely ill, or we may lose our wealth, it may get stolen, or lose it in another way, or we may get some kind of problem, some attack, a demonic attack, for example. And in this way, that is a happy situation turns into suffering.
Tene tadi kokyo toa around soki ani dewa yebe kapsu tene tena ngana dungal tu zento windoa ta gyuru dungal di kokyo to kokla kap di ngarang sa tok tu mare so se jiwa tense tok tu windoa ani dewa de konong dewa in segre mato ani dewa di dungal in segre marwa yinaya dewa di ko kale dungal ju try ji chande dewa to.
So this is a little bit difficult to perceive, isn't it? It's not totally apparent for us as ordinary people, ordinary beings. When we experience our kinds of happiness, we cannot understand to perceive it as suffering. We don't know to perceive it, to take it as actually suffering. As ordinary people, we can't do that. But the fact is that these kinds of happy situations, and they will inevitably end up as suffering. So, in fact, they also are the nature of this suffering of change. Those happy situations are also the nature of this suffering of change.
Kendegi dewa de ene dewa yang tawa sik mare. Dewa yang taba maimbi gyomsege karasana kendegi dewa de ani yun tungtung tene medakpa tene dungalwa jenshik.
So this is actually dewa. So this defiled suffering, defiled happiness, as we call it, and our regular kind of happiness, this defiled happiness, this is actually not true happiness. It's not really happiness. It is not true happiness on the one hand because it is so short and transient. It's impermanent, and it actually ultimately has the nature of suffering.
텐더인지 가세통은 가르송요르잖아. 시송대와 저제스바신 예zam시기 집에 최전인 송요. 세바송선 감숨대. 감숨지 대화대 테니 짜이 카르요베기 실바나신 예수고. 짜이 카르요베기 실바 충좀된저 최당 니마샤려나데 기대지가 코티니 감주.
And it's just as the bodhisattva Togme, he taught that the happiness of the three realms is like dewdrops on the tip of a blade of grass. Its nature is to be destroyed. Its nature is to disappear. So what he means there is when he says the happiness of the three realms refers to there are three realms of samsara, and all of the happiness that's within those three realms of samsara he's comparing to the dewdrop on the tip or the edge of a blade of grass. So And just as when there's a just very small amount of dew on the blade of grass, as soon as the sun comes out or some kind of heat or fresh air or sun comes out, it will be gone very quickly, just like that, like nothing. And so our happiness in samsara, in the realm of samsara, is the same way.
他再开更习惯老心也，安尼我让这几天一条啊，越怎么都没多啊。那越怎么引把的俺就看着心里多不有的是呢，我让这看到个的个推荐的就搞把的了大用的，搞把我们多少就真的长没把是多少的，忙把搞把长没把是用的，俺就单单没这个电话了，没这个电话的，公嘛当节目的了，真那个运通起来多。
So how should we understand that the happiness in the three realms of samsara is so transient, impermanent, like dewdrops on a blade of grass? How is it so short-lived? Well, just consider our lives that we have now. Our lifespan is a short period within this eon of time. And then before this short period of our life as well, there's countless eons that have gone before this life. And similarly, after this life is over, there will be countless eons of time in the future. So when we look at in this time frame, you have just a very short life in the middle, and on either side there's really vast, huge, countless eons of stretches of time. So thinking about it like that way, our happiness in this short life, we can see very clearly that it's really nothing. It's just totally transient.
听这个电话种种电子啦，听呢，阿爸当长期生吧，上几电子给听呢，很把没被接不带的，很多没，很多人会写的没。那那，七月节目啦，呢，七月节目给电话啦，每天给每天把电子给很多没把这个多。七八节目电子，安尼前面讲了这么这个，前面讲了这么这样的，前面给康巴水，前面给塔张水，塔当哪了。看到怎么这不做的的，你没见过的是大样的，我可能怎么在的可能记不住了，因为啊没见过的大样的，对了，英国看也没法是通过了，看这几点不都是开的过的英国生的，没见过过的，从人家写过过的，是那我也不说过过的，看不清不说过的，那第看这个英国的那个了，那不过七八这个社下去看不的，看这英国通过有嘛的，看是英国有嘛的，不过七八这前面看不说觉得英国还没嘛，没电有嘛的，看了啥有嘛的，前面这么看不了。제목이 갈라서 여러 제목이 되는 하양 여러 데 미긴 따도 집에 제목에 대화는 인범에 받고 어떤 거라야 다 자르와 상계에 당 잠시 선바도 저기 직등기 대화돼서 다 직등기 gem바도 저거 보고기 제목 대화돼 편도매 받는 하시 직등기 대화서 상계기 다 인범에 받고 거였다 편도 가야매 받 가르서나 대화디 kirgiyo 말에 대화디 얘기 균을 좀 부대고 말에 편도매 받는 장 근데 상계기 다디 편도매 받지
So the bodhisattvas and Buddhas, these noble beings, when they look at our kind of happiness, what we consider to be happiness in our lives, they look at it as being basically useless and without any purpose. For example, just like children that are playing games. It's kind of like when adults look at children and they're playing games and understand from their point of view that there's no purpose to those games. It's the same when these bodhisattvas and Buddhas, these noble beings, look at our what we take to be happiness. Like, for example, when the children are playing with the sand castles, building things out of sand, for them, they get such enjoyment and think there's a real purpose to building these houses and the different people, and there's different events going on, and there's in their sand worlds that they're playing with. But when like adults will look at these children playing with the sandcastles, there's no purpose at all for them. It's a totally meaningless waste of time. Because for adults in the world, for them, what is purposeful, what has a real meaning, is having money, have to make money and be able to have get ourselves a place to stay and so on, and have a family and things like that. Generally, people in the world have this idea of what is the really, truly meaningful and purposeful, to have this kind of happiness with the money and the family and so on. And then they look at the children building sand castles and playing in the sand in their sand game. And none of that is there. There's no money to be made there. There's no real, like, a food you can eat or a place that you can stay or family and our general kind of happiness that we have. So it's useless in the eyes of people generally in the world. And with the bodhisattvas and the Buddhas, when they look at us and what we consider important and consider to be happiness, they feel exactly the same way. They see it exactly the same way. They see that what we consider to be so valuable and to be happiness is actually not happiness, and there's no purpose, in fact, to it. And first of all, because that happiness that we experience, it doesn't last at all. It's totally transient, and it's the nature of suffering as well.
이바데 다 미다바레서라 다 미다바데 대화데 아니 직선도와 스승대와 따제 세바신 유든지 직배 최전이 송다 직배 최전이 세데 다 대화데 아니 갈레칼레 줄로에 그 대화데 딱 빠때만 말와 갈레칼레 줄로고데 다 줄와데라니 직 나브레 데인디 미다바스 니바데 미다바탄 직니 직바 직팅이 대화던서 다 줄로고 템보요 마레스
담보데
유점
유점래 메타bolizm.
somebody 동알와.
So this is how our happiness is transient, how it is just ephemeral, only very short period of time. And as for the second point about how our happiness is suffering, it is also impermanent. And when the bodhisattva Togme, he said that our happiness in samsara is like a drops of dew on a blade of grass, on the edge of a blade of grass. This is also what he's talking about, the fact that our happiness is impermanent. That it cannot ever remain forever. It will always change. And it will always change into suffering.
숨바테나 pengi 동안와테나 동안와 시김바테 아는 구루를 붙이기 어르선에 총세 대양 주로의 동안을 선다. 에네 간다직 댕기 대화된조 안에 내 간데 반줄 줄니 안에 거두 그래. 동안을 양 동안을 경우라. 그 동안을 경우데 대화때 동안을 줄. 댕기 동안과 식차기도 와. 댕디 다 감성코를 대화데 대화 양토 마인 라바 점센터래. 유점 미다바 동안과 식인데 딱 되네 대화 양토. 그래서
So then, for the third way that our samsaric happiness is not really happiness, for why it is suffering, is because it is suffering. Its nature is suffering. And this is also referred to by Guru Rinpoche when he said, even if there is some happiness in the world, actually that happiness is truly the suffering of change. So when this refers to the fact that when we experience what we consider to be happiness, the samsaric happiness, it will always change into suffering. It's always changing. So in the end, it becomes suffering. So its nature is actually suffering. So these are the reasons why our happiness in samsara, what we consider to be happiness, is actually suffering. For one thing, it is extremely short-lived, like ephemeral. And for the second thing, it is impermanent. And the third is that it is the nature of suffering. And this is how all of our happiness is in our lives, in the world. Yeah, it's at first there is some happiness, a little bit of happiness, some happiness, and then slowly it's kind of becomes unstable. Then in the end changes into suffering. So in the end, the result of it, in fact, is suffering. But this is actually not apparent to us ordinary beings. We cannot see this. When we experience some happiness, can we ever really understand? Can we ever really think while we're experiencing that happiness, oh, this happiness is really short-lived, it's so ephemeral? We don't really think that, right? And furthermore, when we experience this kind of worldly happiness, none of us really is able to remember or to think this happiness is inevitably going to change, it's going to disappear. This is impermanent happiness. We also are not able to think in that way, right? And also, when we experience our happiness, we never really able to think also that in the end, this happiness will result in suffering. The inevitable result of this happiness would be suffering. We don't really think that. We can't see that. So this kind of suffering, these things are not apparent to us. So the ones who can actually see this and truly understand this are the noble beings. They have the ability to understand this, and they have that level of understanding that they can see this directly. But as for us, we cannot see this at the moment. As we are now, it's difficult for us to understand this, and it's not apparent, but slowly we will arrive at an understanding of this, and we will be able to see this. So how to do that is, first we have to study, we have to read the texts, Buddhist scriptures and Buddhist texts and study about the topic, and we will come to some understanding in that way. But this understanding of this matter is a indirect way of understanding it. It's just on the basis of inference. We understand it intellectually in a way. Whereas the noble beings, they can see this directly. They understand this in a very clear, direct way. So first, we will arrive at an understanding of this based on inference or maybe an intellectual understanding. And then on the basis of that, by practicing the Dharma, meditation, and so on, eventually we will also be able to see this directly and totally clearly.
그 제법당 심시 되어서 안데서 삼로당 고요레스나 페브나 줄라디 잡로페라 테네 바르데요나 아니 라디 잡로톤 맹무슨 통화이나 에데 무슨 아 라디 잡로라 메 바르데레키 토아티 통용디 테네바 토아티 통 라디 잡로만도 토아티 통용디 오 토아티라 테네 잡로 메도아 삼바시도아 어디 제법레 제법스나 토아기 제라 테네 메톡토 제라 빠과 Wala tani ani mela samlo tang pa ba sina samlo tang ra me ba ha ko. Chik ngosum tok chik se pa.
So how can we understand these two modes of understanding, modes of seeing this reality? On the one hand, the understanding things inferentially or intellectually, and then on the other hand, seeing them directly, having a direct understanding of them. Well, we can use an example. If there is a fire on the other side of a mountain, that we can see the smoke coming up from behind the mountain. If we were to go there, behind the mountain, and look at that fire and see, we travel from where we are on the other side of the mountain, go behind the mountain, see the fire directly. We can see it with our own eyes. That's comparable to direct perception or direct understanding. Whereas if we just remain where we are on the other side of the mountain and see the smoke coming up from the behind the mountain, and we can just infer on the basis of that smoke that there should be fire behind the mountain. That is comparable to this inferential understanding or intellectual understanding. So it's just on the basis of some sign like the smoke. We have the thought and the inference that there is fire there, but we don't see the fire directly. And that is like an inferential kind of intellectual understanding.
인지 여러분 번역에 파관남지 감모스도 시게레소. 강아랑소 가당 땡제 라마 계신이나 땡데 제박 조도 타주를 동마테 도비요레스. 그냥 레벨부 독도민도 알아서 코로나닝보 메라닝 버송서 다 코로나닝보 연바르 단도닝보 더 우송이 되기라 닝보 되어도 되니.
So the noble beings, the bodhisattvas and Buddhas, they have a direct, clear understanding of the suffering of change. But as for us, we have to rely on the words of the Buddha and the treatises written by great masters and our lamas and teachers. We have to rely on their instruction, on those kind of instructions to get intellectual understanding of this first, and then deepen that understanding. And this is all of this is not really easy, is it? It's not so straightforward. Just as it said, samsara, which has no true value, I take to have great value. There's that line. So we generally we don't understand that our samsara has no value, and we always thinking it has some real meaning and value.
And then doing an alpha, customer, Kura Comeni, Kurawaki Kamshi, Dita, Kura Devala Tini, Devara do something, some of the Kurashungi, or Linayang, they don't a Shasha, they don't Mashane, and it's an announce again. Kura Deva, the Teva Yang of my use them by him, meet up by him, but any Tamadungarim, but the kind of some of those stamp. They was those stamp to buy in a Nick, Jury Tonadi, and I'll get some to the tuba. And it's to this.
So we have our habits, our habitual patterns, our habit energy from being in samsara without a beginning for this incredibly long amount of time. So we shouldn't just take a kind of superficial understanding that this happiness of samsara has no value, it's not really happiness, and just leave it at that. We should contemplate very carefully in a sustained way how our happiness in samsara, what we consider to be happiness in samsara, is extremely short-lived and ephemeral, how it is impermanent, and how its true nature is suffering. We should really go through this very thoroughly, and then finally we will be able to get a full and direct understanding, clear understanding and experience of the suffering of change.
It's Thomas Koyang, it's Kabuyore, Dungalki Dungati, Namsam Kotukere, in a great Dungatan, Tabung Chaba Dusi Dungatan, the Kokabure, in a test Kalijam Jana, Shetukere. Dungalki Dungatin, when you are, any great Dungati Kokure, Chira, something about Totumado or any Chaba Duje Dungati Shin to Kokure, Masato and Kanakapo. And it Kalekabuyore, and I also Kalejam. Those 2010 and Jana, the Dunga somebody Yakushi, Dunga somebody Yakushi, so I know anyone Yakushagda.
So these three types of suffering are not so easy to understand. They're difficult for us to get the full understanding of. The suffering of suffering is not so hard. This is directly apparent to us. Generally, we understand that. But then the suffering of change is hidden. It's not apparent to us. But if we make effort, we will be able to understand that kind of suffering. If we really practice well, we will be able to see it. And then in addition, the third of these three root sufferings, the pervasive suffering of conditioned phenomena, this suffering in comparison with the suffering of change is extremely hidden, not only hidden or not apparent, but it's extremely hidden. It's something that is extremely hidden, difficult to see. But again, if we make effort and practice well, make real effort to understand these three kinds of suffering, we will eventually understand them and then get a direct experience and understanding of them. And if we're able to do that, to get this true total understanding of those three sufferings, we will be in a very good place. We will be doing very well.
다른 게 슈딩티 안에 들어서 그것도 처음에 안에 줘봐. somebody 아니 저기 이번에 당하면 년 받으러 다 somebody 좀 하는 I heard it so about.
So now the session is finished for today, and now we recited the aspiration, dedication aspiration, which is our third part, right? So we finished the second part, which was listening to the Dharma, learning the Dharma, and now we're in the third part, which is the dedication aspiration. So let's all recite them together.
Yes, 아니 전대 책이 여봐야 레와요. 아니 냠낸 책이 여봐요. 여봐야 레와요. 아니 카벤치스 제마자용스.
So I wish everybody my greeting, give everybody my greetings, Ateshi Delay. And I really hope you are all doing well. I also hope that you are being diligent in your practice. I hope that you are practicing very well. Yeah, this is my greetings, and we'll see each other later.
Okay. Jay all.